Hey, what's going on, everybody? Ryan Knuppel here, Knup Sports Show, episode 238. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you tuning in, as always. Today, we have another amazing guest. I cannot wait to dive in. As you know, we love to bring you leaders in sports, in iGaming, in business, and showcase what they're doing. These awesome people doing awesome things. So we have another one for you today. I'm excited to do that. Hopefully, you're enjoying the holidays. Had a great Thanksgiving. Watched some amazing football. Watched the Bears kind of choke it away. That was crazy. Crazy game on Thanksgiving. I'm looking forward to some Christmas basketball and all the above here over the next few weeks. All right, that's about it. No real housekeeping for today. No more events, no more iGaming events for me for the rest of the year. We'll start showcasing some of those at the beginning of 2025. But I get a little break from traveling, and I'll be here running a few shows and just keeping the business afloat. So, all right, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest today. Today we have Dean Sisun. Dean, how are you?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
I cannot wait to dive in and talk about you and ProphetX. Dean is with ProphetX. But first off, Dean, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, kind of your path that led you to ProphetX.
Happy to. So where do I want to begin? I'm initially from the suburbs of New York. Grew up there my whole life. I went to college at Vanderbilt. I lived in Nashville for another year and a half after I graduated. I loved it down there. And I worked in finance. I was in investment banking during my time down there. Always, though, I had a deep passion for sports betting. I was betting even in high school and college. You can call me an enthusiast, among other words. And at one point or another, when I was there, I thought of this idea for Prophet, where it was a marketplace for bettors to trade with each other. In other words, an exchange, right? Peer-to-peer marketplace where people can set prices on their own or take others that others are offering. So I was in banking for a year and a half out of school and then transitioned into this. We were starting this, my co-founder and I, who also went to Vanderbilt with me, at a time when PASPA was not repealed yet. So we were looking at this in 2017, leading into 2018, and then PASPA was repealed. And while that was, kind of unfolding, we were looking at moving into the UK market. It was fully legal out there. We said to ourselves, let's go launch a test market out there while it's illegal in the US. We had heard rumors of what the legalized US space would look like, and it sounded quite expensive. We were, two 23-year-olds out of school. We did not have any money. So we simply couldn't afford to do that. So our plan was to go move to the UK, build out traction, raise money off that, and then come back into the regulated US landscape. One thing led to another. We are out of the regulated market. We are now operating as a sweepstakes platform, but under the gist of still an exchange where people can exchange with one another on their sports trades. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. Most of my background is very profit related, but that's how I got into this. I was betting for a long time. I thought of this idea in college. I went into investment banking after school and then eventually transitioned into this.
Well, it's funny. Out of all of that, my very first thought was, did you ever get to march down Broadway in Nashville holding a gold when you went to Vanderbilt, or did you get to miss out on that adventure when you were there?
I'm trying to think of our biggest win. Our biggest win was against Georgia at home. And I'll back up even more. My first game was, it was in 2013. We were playing Ole Miss. It was like that first Thursday when college football starts. All the freshmen run onto the field before the game. It was unbelievable. We were, so excited. And we took the lead late in the fourth quarter with like a minute 20 left. We converted a 4th and 16. Jordan Matthews, if you remember, caught a 4th and 16 pass. I can't even remember who our quarterback was. Anyway, we took the lead by 4 with a minute left, and Ole Miss, from their own 25, ran a stretch play to open up their 1-minute drive, and they took it to the house, 75 yards touchdown. And I despised the team ever since that. I loathed them from that moment.
That was going to be one of those moments. You were going to.
Oh my God! Yeah,
coming down.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the point of my story is I went to the Georgia game, and I was there for about a quarter and a half. But it was an early game. We were tailgating. I was exhausted, and it was raining, and I was like, I'm not going to stay here in the rain to watch us get killed. And I passed out when I got home, and I woke up, and we won. So that was the biggest win of outside of us beating Alabama of my Vanderbilt career, and I missed the whole game. So
wow. Well,
I would have loved to carry that field goal post down Broadway, or better yet, just into our off-campus house backyard. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, what a scene though that was. What a scene! It just shows how much passion there is in college sports. It's unbelievable to me how exciting that. It actually makes me a little jealous. I went to a small school that wasn't really football related, and so it makes me a little jealous. Why didn't I go to one of these massive schools just to be a part of something like that? But I guess we all can do it through fandom a little bit, and just not as students. So let's get back on track here, Dean. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about ProphetX. I'm going to pull up the site here. Let's talk a little bit more in depth. You kind of were high level about what you guys are doing, but why don't we expand a little bit and talk a little bit about, one, what you're doing in detail, two, what sports you're kind of working in, and three, I'll ask the third question later. That's enough to start.
Yeah, so in detail, ProphetX competes against the traditional sportsbook model, right? The traditional sportsbook model is I offer -110 on spreads. I offer pretty high VIG across markets. The VIG only increases as I parlay outcomes together. And the reason that is because you as an individual are betting against the sportsbook, right? It is you against them. So it is in their best interest to win money, naturally. And it is also in their best interest to carefully look at each profile of each user. So that impacts certain people having the capability to even play on a sportsbook. Whereas with us, everything is all peer-to-peer. So you can see the prices are a lot tighter than your typical -110, -110 spreads. And then additionally, there is no limiting, there is no banning of any users, because we are just the intermediary collecting a commission on volume that comes in. Whereas with the sportsbook, again, it's you against them. And then additionally on our site, what you can do is you can request your own price. So you can change the odds and fool around with whatever stake you want at that price. So competing against the sportsbook model in those facets. And then on sports, you can see some of our menu here, but basically our sporting menu is a function of how big our community is. So, with a peer-to-peer site, you will only be able to get action down on stuff that has money on it, right? If there are other people out there willing to take a price, you are able to get that offer down. So as you can see now that we've been getting a lot larger, our sporting menu is definitely a lot larger.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's expand on that a little bit, because I think, I've heard that frustration from others using peer-to-peers in the past is kind of this whole, well, I want to make this bet, and I'd love to get better odds, but sometimes I'll place a bet with better odds and it doesn't get filled, and then I'm like, crap, I didn't get my bet that I knew I wanted to get.
Yeah.
There's this frustration. How do you answer that? How do you answer that in general?
Yeah, it's a classic chicken and the egg problem, right?
Yeah.
With any marketplace. So I've spoken on a couple of podcasts about this, but I always look at like Uber and Lyft as a really good chicken and egg solver in terms of marketplaces, because without any drivers, you wouldn't have riders, and without any riders, you wouldn't have drivers. So how do you fix the chicken and the egg problem? And what they did is they paid for the supply side of the equation, basically. So what they would do is they would pay drivers just to sit there.
Yep.
And anytime a rider came along, they would make sure the rider had a good experience and they were able to get a ride. And then that's how they built up their marketplace to the point where they didn't need to pay their drivers upfront fees anymore. It would just be based on each ride. With us, the way we solve the marketplace problem is a lot of what you see on the site is those dollar amounts underneath each odds. Those are numbers supplied to us by service providers. So what these service providers do is they, think of like a traditional like Citadel, but for sports, right? Like they are an institutional fund that has an interest in trading on these exchanges. But the way the relationship works with us is they provide us odds recommendations. We put them up, and then they also provide recommendations of how much money to put down on each outcome. And we give them basically a discounted offer to come, give us those services. So the way we solve that liquidity issue is with them. They basically get the party started. And then once they have the party started, then people come in and request their own prices, and it's much easier for them to get filled. And then, the flywheel starts from there.
Great answer. That's an amazing answer. I was always of the opinion, if this doesn't get filled, it just wasn't meant to be. It just wasn't meant to be. And I used to obsess over it, right? But now it's like, just not meant to be, I guess. It wasn't there. It wasn't in the stars.
It definitely still happens, right? Like if you ask for a price that's just unfair for the other side, then it's certainly not meant to be.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Or if the number moves against you, then it's not meant to be, right? But if you're asking for a fair price, 90% of the time you'll have a really good experience.
Very cool. Very cool. So you mentioned the word sweepstakes earlier. I want to dive into that a little bit because some people probably are thinking, well, wait, how is this legal? How is this different than like the operators that are taking bets and peer-to-peer? Talk a little bit about sweepstakes and the legality of all of this and where people can play as well alongside of all that discussion.
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is I'm not a lawyer, right? So I can't dive into maybe as much of the legality as you'd like me to, but
surface.
Surface level. What I can say is we're live in 40 states. Sweepstakes are materially different than your traditional regulated betting sites. What you are doing is you are offering a free-to-play service with a social currency, and then attached to that free-to-play service is a sweepstakes service where you're offering a sweepstakes currency where you can enter into these sweepstakes and win real prizes. That is like the super surface level, high level like explanation of why this space exists. It has existed for a very long time. I believe since 2010, VGW launched their first sweepstakes casino. The casino space is far more popular than the sports space. There are a couple of popular players in the sweepstakes sports space that are coming up, but I will say that the reason we ended up going down this path was because the regulated model is not built for startups, unfortunately. I think they have their reasons why it is not, right? Like they are focused on short-term tax revenue. They're focused on protecting the consumer. And a lot of that comes with cost, right? And cost is very adverse to startups. The number one reason why all startups fail is because they run out of money. Yeah. And I've, kind of leading the team here, felt that pain tremendously when we were operating in New Jersey. It's very, very expensive. If we were to launch in more states, it would get even more expensive. You're basically battling a race against time. So we ended up moving in the sweepstakes direction. Now you can still use our site as an exchange, right? But there are different, I'll say, ways to utilize it, like on the free-to-play side and then on the sweepstakes side. But anyway, I know it's a little confusing, but that's a little more insight into why we made that switch and what sweepstakes is.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think a lot of people are hearing this term, right? Sweepstakes a lot these days. And so hearing, your take on it and how it fits into ProphetX, I think is very valuable. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit about your community, because you mentioned community earlier, and I'm assuming being a peer-to-peer and very social type experience, the growth of a community is very important. Let's talk about your community and how you're working on building that and growing that.
Yeah, so it's a good question because it's a different answer depending on what phase you're in, right? I think, when we were in New Jersey, phase one was just educating people on the exchange, like 100%. How someone's going to come onto the site and they're going to have 30 seconds to figure it out. Otherwise, you lose their attention and you'll never see them again. So it's very product oriented. It still is very product and education oriented. But now that we have more of a base who enjoys using our site, a lot of it is understanding why they're using our site and then building the site basically for those earlier adopters. Because then at that point, you can start to build more flywheels from there. So that's number one. And then number two is, honestly, it's not a super sexy answer, but spending money to get the word out there is huge, right? Like we've seen our early numbers, they're strong. We like what we have, but how do we make this for the masses? And is this built for the masses? Our vision is to make this mainstream, right? To make the exchange mainstream, to compete with sportsbooks, but also complement them. How do we get there? And, again, the non-sexy answer is spending money for awareness, right? So, we have a big plan put together of how we are going to do that and who we're going to work with, the right people to work with. But it starts with, that initial community of getting the product right for them and then getting the messaging right after that.
I'm sure you do have a big plan. Let's talk a little bit about this plan without diving too deep, but not necessarily the marketing side, just in general with ProphetX. What are you guys looking to do in the near future? I mean, what's the game plan look like? Is it as simple as just building the community, or do you have some things you can talk about that are in the pipeline?
Yeah, I would love to. So, I don't know how many listeners have ever used our site, but there is certain friction on the site right now that you can't, or I should say that you frequently run into. So, number one is just cleaning up some mistakes. But number two is if you are ever trading on both sides of an outcome. So if you take, I don't know, is it Rams 49ers Thursday night? If you're taking the Rams at plus 125 at the beginning of the game and you want to trade out of your position, you can do that, but you would have to deposit or purchase more funds, right, on a sports book. Whereas with us, what we want to do is you take the Rams at plus 125 and you could trade out of that position without having to put more money on. So basically what our site would do is read what your net position is, and then your wallet would function accordingly. So if I had positions on both sides, there's a worst case scenario, right? Like I don't need $100 out there on each side. There's a worst case scenario in there and my wallet would reflect that. So that's a big feature that we're focusing on. In terms of the plan, like, without divulging too much, honestly, it's just about working with the right people, the people who are bought in, the people who understand the exchange to start. That's very key, because if you don't partner with the right people who don't understand the exchange, then people are going to have a misconception of the exchange. They might not like it. They might not come back. So, getting the early partners right is pretty key. So part of our job is to educate those early partners, right? So, and it's why we've hired some people on our team to do that. But yeah, it's a little more about some product features coming out and some plans that we have in place.
Very cool. Amazing. Well, it looks like an amazing platform. I'm excited to dive in and try it. I'll admit I haven't used it yet, but I've looked at it, I've checked it out. So I'm going to dive in and use it and check it out. A couple follow-up questions here. I know we're running short on time, but most of the listeners of this show are probably more B2B type listeners. So they're going to be other businesses, other leaders, other CEOs doing amazing things in this industry that we all love, right? So our question here. First, what advice do you give other co-founders, other leaders, other CEOs, maybe other startups that admire where you're at and are trying to get there? What advice do you give them? That's one. Second, what ask do you have? What ask do you have for maybe people that are ahead of you, maybe people that are, out there looking at this like, man, I like what he's doing. I want to work with him. What ask do you have of the community?
The ask I would have of the community is, number one, what would you do differently if you were to look back 5 years ago with how your product shaped out? I know what my answer would be, but how do you view that? And then two, how do you view where do you see the space going as a whole? I think is what I would like to know from leaders out there.
Cool.
In terms of how we would work with them, as an operator, it's pretty binary, right? It's like, can you help us get more customers and get more revenue or not? And it's, it is almost solely focused on the marketing side for us right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if anyone out there is an affiliate and wants to work with us, I encourage you to reach out. But in terms of advice for, maybe some people that we are ahead of, I would really think about, depending on what kind of company you are operating in this space. Number one, where you see yourself in 5 years and where your company is going to be in 5 years. And two, I would take more chances than you're comfortable with. Is something that I look back on and think about, some of my regrets is I wish I took more chances. And I mean, quitting my job in finance, moving into the UK at 23 years old and starting a sports gambling company that, you might think that's taking a pretty big chance, but I honestly wish I took more chances along the way. So yeah, that's how I think about things. That's what I would want to hear from some leaders is what would you do differently? And I'd really think about where you see yourself in 5 years if I'm a younger company and think about how you can take more chances than maybe you're not even thinking about right now.
Amazing advice, Dean. Amazing advice. Really appreciate you giving that to everybody. Thank you so much. Any last words? Anything we missed? Anything you want to talk about here in the closing minutes of this show?
Good question. I'm very curious to hear your product feedback when you get a chance to look at it. So keep me posted. But no, that's actually it's funny you asked me that because that is my last interview question that I ask people, and it's, is there anything I didn't ask you today that you would like me to ask you right now? But I think you covered this pretty well, especially for the audience that you have. And you pulled up the site, which is unique to some podcasts that I've been on before. So no, I appreciate you being thorough, and I enjoyed my time.
Absolutely. Well, I wish you all the success in the world, Dean, and I can't wait to have you on again in the future and talk a little bit more about the success that you guys are having. So congrats on all of that, and wish you best of luck.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
All right. Take care. All right. That was Dean Sisun of ProphetX. What an amazing story he has, and it looks like an amazing site. Like I said, I can't wait to dive out here and play. Hopefully you guys got some value of that. If you have played, I'd love to hear your feedback on it. If you haven't, we'll put links in the show notes. That was one question I didn't ask. I know Dean's not on anymore, but I'll make sure to put some contact details to Dean. I'll make sure to put the site links and all of that forefront in the show notes of this site. But it is ProphetX.co. So make sure you go out there, check it out, see what they have going on there. And remember Dean's last piece of advice for you up and coming founders and leaders: take more chances than you are comfortable with. I totally relate to that advice as well. Being older in my career, my entrepreneurial path now, I totally relate with that as well. I mean, I think you'll never regret taking chances. So take those and see where they bring you. All right. I think that's a wrap on episode 238. Really appreciate all the support. If I don't talk to you all in the next coming weeks, have a great holiday, and we'll see you at the beginning of the new year. All right. Till next time, I'm Ryan Knuppel. Take care and stay safe. Have a good one.